Welcome back to More to the Story, the podcast all about creative nonfiction, writing, publishing, sharing your true personal story with the world. I'm your host, Jana Marlise Marin, and I'm so happy to be here. I'm happy to be here back for a third week in a row. And as I've shared in the last couple of episodes, I'm trying to keep things simple over here, trying to keep things easy to jump on and hit record and share my thoughts with you no matter what's going on, right? Because I don't know about you, but stories are more important now more than ever. We need your story more now than we've ever needed it. Women especially, we need to hear from you. And I'm gonna sit here and keep talking to women because those are the people that I am called to serve and support. And so if you're a woman, you identify as a woman, and you've always wanted to write a book, I'm here for you. In addition to this podcast, I also publish a literary arts magazine called Under the Gumtree. You can learn more about that at underthegumtree.com. I am also a book coach and editor, as I mentioned, for women writing nonfiction. You can find out more about that business and working with me at moretothestory.co. That is .co, C-O, not .com. And if you are watching this on YouTube, bless your soul. I have no YouTube following. But as I'm sitting here recording in front of my laptop computer, it just occurred to me, well, I can hit record in more than one application at a time. So I hit record in GarageBand for my audio and in Simple, Easy, QuickTime on my Macintosh computer for recording video. And I've got the sun coming directly in the window in my office, shining right on my face. There we go. If I lean back a little bit, I'm out of it. But I don't want it to be too far back from the microphone. So again, I keep mentioning, I'm just trying to keep things easy and simple and eliminate barriers and not allow things like what time of day it is and where is the sun hitting my face to keep me from recording. And that's an example that I'm trying to live for you all out there that may or may not, that may end up with some coming, like how many of you can find yourself getting in these cycles where, excuse me, I have a little bit of a tickle in my throat. I need a sip of water. Sorry for that. Again, keeping things easy and simple. Not going to edit that out. The only post-production that I do for the audio is drop in the theme song at the beginning before I compress the file and upload it. So what I was saying is, how often do you find yourself coming up with reasons or excuses for why you can't do something? Well, we're going to talk about that today. So, let's see. It's mid-February, if you can believe it, by the time this episode releases. And a couple weeks ago at the end of January, I hosted an event called Book Chat. It's a new offering that I'm trying out where it's a small, intimate group on Zoom with me. You can sign up for $97 and get a one-time group coaching session with me. Come talk about your book. Tell me about your book project. Ask questions, talk through challenges, and get immediate input, direction, feedback from me, an experienced book coach and editor. And why do you care what I have to say? Why would you care to hear my direction and input on what you're dealing with? Well, maybe because since I started my business in 2020, 4 of my clients have books published. And from the time that I'm recording this episode to the next 18 months, another 4 of my clients will have books published. They have books coming out in the next 18 months. One of my clients is signed with an agent. Another one of my clients has been applied and been accepted to a prestigious writing workshop. One of my clients whose books is published was published as a result of winning a manuscript contest. So these are the kind of wins that the women I work with are having after working with me, because they come to me with some variation of where they are in their manuscript, book project, book writing journey, publishing journey, and they feel stuck and they don't know how to move forward and they don't know what to do with the project. They don't know what to do with the manuscript. They don't know how to finish. They don't know what next steps to take. And so they come to me and they tell me about what they're working on. They tell me about where they are, what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish. And I don't always tell them what to do. I mean, sometimes I do. I have some intuition and instinct and insight that I can say, oh, well, have you tried this? Have you tried that? But really what I do is I ask questions and I help my clients get clear on what they want, what their goals are. And then I help them get clear on the plan of action steps to take to accomplish that goal and that vision that they have for themselves. And then I hold them accountable. Because as soon as you make a plan, guess what? You're going to come upon obstacles. You're going to hit roadblocks. And it's easy to feel like you're hitting a roadblock and you're just going to say, oh, that's it. I tried. I can't do it anymore. It's not going to work. This isn't for me. You hit one roadblock and you kind of throw your arms up and you think, oh, guess that means I can't do it. I shouldn't do it. And so when that happens with my clients, they come to a group coaching session, unless they're paying for a higher version of working with me, because I do have some one-on-one options available. And they talk through this, and I ask them questions, and we come up with another plan. And the accountability of reporting in on a regular basis is something that really helps people keep going and take action on things that they haven't been able to take action on their own. So I was telling you about this opportunity to get on a small one-time group coaching session with me called Book Chat. I've only done it once so far. And I probably will do it again. So if you're interested, leave a comment on YouTube, leave a comment on Substack. I will connect with you and make sure you're on my list for getting the announcements about the next Book Chat event. Haven't planned it yet, haven't scheduled it yet, but I will. And I'm telling you about it because after the event, it was such a great event, by the way. The women who joined me were talking about how much I helped them, how great it was for them to have a place where they could come and talk and share and feel less alone. Not only are they getting direction and feedback from me, but they're connecting with other women who are facing similar challenges and realizing that, oh, hey, I'm not the only one who goes through this stuff. And if other people are dealing with it and still able to make progress and move forward, then probably that means that I can too. So after that event, I emailed the folks who had shown interest in the event. And I can do that with my fancy email program, because if you click the event but you don't sign up, I can keep track of that. Maybe that feels a little bit too invasive in your privacy, but it's very helpful to small business owners like me, because then I can follow up with those folks and say, hey, I'm looking for some quick feedback. If you don't mind, I'd love to know, what was the reason why you didn't sign up? Was it cost? Was it a scheduling issue with the date and time? Was it something else? And if it was something else, please just hit reply to this email and let me know. So I got some responses to that. Not a lot, not as many as I would like, but every single response I got, I wonder if you even in your mind have an idea of like, oh, I bet I know what kind of response that was. Like, I wonder if you even have an inkling of, if you were somebody who I reached out to and said, hey, how come you didn't sign up for this thing? I'm just curious, because what I'm trying to do is improve my offerings so that I can offer things that people want and need and know that instantly that it will help them, and that when there's an opportunity to sign up and work with me, it's a no-brainer. That's my goal. And so the only way I get to improve and tweak what I'm doing is by asking for feedback. So I make it a practice and a habit of doing that on a regular basis. So I wonder if you're someone who maybe even got that email from me, and you have an answer yourself for why you would suspect why someone would say they didn't sign up for something like this. It's because why? The responses I got, every single person had some variation of, oh, I didn't sign up because I'm not ready. Because now's not the right time. And I got these responses, and I did ask a few folks for some more clarification. Like, why do you think you're not ready? What do you mean when you say you're not ready? Why do you think you're not ready? And what do you think you need? What do you feel like you need to feel like you would be ready? But this hit me because it's this pattern that I see frequently. This is not the first time I've heard this. Women that I talk to about their book projects, I'll give you another example. I went to a conference almost exactly a year ago. It was March 2024. It was the first time I'd ever been to this conference, and I had pitched to be a speaker, and I didn't get accepted as a speaker, but I still went anyway as just an attendee. And it was still a good experience because meeting the other attendees there organically was a great way for me to gauge whether the folks there would be good potential clients for me. Well, I got to, I had several opportunities to meet people and talk with them in the sessions and at the meals because the conference included breakfast and lunch. And would you believe this was a conference for women, small business women, women who are small business owners, primarily in the creative field. And creative is kind of loosely defined. There's a lot of designers, like lifestyle professionals, those kind of folks, artists. Would you believe that every time I introduced myself as a book coach, what was the exact same response that I got every single time I introduced myself as a book coach from these women at this conference? The response 100% of the time was, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to write a book. And when I hear that, the very next thing I say is, oh, that's awesome. Well, tell me why you haven't. Tell me what's holding you back. And we almost end up having like a little mini coaching session right then and there, like in the buffet line or in just the 2 or 3 minutes before the session that we're sitting in is starting. It's the same version. It's like I was saying, it's a variation of this I'm not ready. Like they say things like, oh, I'm waiting for my following to get bigger. Oh, I don't really feel like I'm a good enough writer. Oh, I have young kids at home, and so I'm waiting for them to get a little bit older because I don't really feel like I have the time. Or I'm waiting for my business to get a little bit more stable and feel like I'm a little bit more established. There's always some reason that these women have convinced themselves for why now is not the time to write their book. I'm not ready. It's a variation on the theme of I'm not ready. And when I say reasons, you're sitting there listening and nodding your head thinking, yeah, those are all pretty good reasons. But guess what? Those aren't reasons. Those are stories that we make up to make ourselves feel better about why we haven't done the thing that we say we want to do. We say we've always wanted to write a book, but ... and then we have this infinite list of things that we fill in the blank following that word but for why it hasn't happened yet. It's a variation on the theme of I'm not ready. Well, I want to talk about I'm not ready. And this came up recently because my husband Jeremy and I were watching a movie a few weekends ago. And it's one of our pastimes because he's previously worked in the film industry, and so he's a big movie buff, big film buff, and so we're frequently looking for movies that he and I can watch together because he also has some obscure tastes compared to mine sometimes. But so we saw this movie on Netflix, and he already knew about it, and I hadn't seen it or heard about it, but he right away was like, oh, I've been wanting to watch this movie. It's called Saturday Night. It's about the production of the very first episode of Saturday Night Live. And so we watched the trailer, and I immediately was like, oh yeah, let's watch that. So we watched it. And if you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it and you have Netflix, highly recommend it. It's almost laughable how chaotic and absurd this movie makes the production of the first episode of Saturday Night Live come off as. Now, obviously, there's no way for us to know how accurate it is, how close to the truth it really is. But just imagine a TV studio in the 70s run over with 20-something right out of college kids. They're running around. They're literally smoking weed, having sex in different rooms. I mean, it looks like a frat party. It looks like the studio has been run over by a frat party, but they're trying to produce a television show. And everybody's vying for airtime. They're way over time limit from dress rehearsal. They've got to cut all this material. They don't know what the flow of the show is going to be. And it's like less than an hour and a half before they're supposed to go live. And literally the studio hands and the execs are these old dudes, these old white dudes, kind of sitting back, crossing their arms, laughing at these 20-year-olds running around, not knowing what the hell they're doing, and refusing to step in and help and do their jobs because they're just entertained by the assumption that these guys are going to completely and utterly fail. And Lorne Michaels, the creator of Saturday Night Live, is the shortest and the youngest looking of all these 20-somethings. And the producer, the network producer, keeps badgering him the whole night long. Like, the network, I keep getting calls from the network. They want to know what's going on. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? You completely overhauled the sound package, the lighting package. You ordered a llama. Why do you have a live llama? Like, what's going on? And Lorne Michaels says, well, when Edison invented electricity, nobody asked him what the light bulb was. And the producer says, well, who are you in this metaphor? And Lorne Michaels doesn't answer that question, but he says, look, what I'm trying to say is you can't expect people to recognize something they've never seen. And the producer says, okay, yeah, I get it. That's right. But what about a final script? Can we get a final script? And Lorne Michaels says, well, that's not this kind of show. And the producer says, okay, well, then what kind of show is it? Do you even know what kind of show this is? And Lorne Michaels says, yeah. And the producer says, okay, are you going to share it with the rest of us? And Lorne Michaels says, of course I am. And he looks at his watch and he says, in 88 minutes, which was the time to go live on the show. Well, then later on it comes out that the studio was expecting them to fail because there was a contract dispute between the network and Johnny Carson, and the network wanted to prove to Johnny Carson that reruns of his show would do just as well as the live show. And so they booked this show Saturday night that they expected to fail and not do well. Man, on video, that sun is really just right in my eyes right now as I'm talking. We're just going to go with it. We're going with it. We're keeping the barriers low, right? It is what it is. So the network was in contract disputes with Johnny Carson, and they wanted to prove to Johnny Carson that the reruns of the show would do just as well as the live show. So they booked the show Saturday night, expecting that it would fail, and when it failed, they had the rerun of a Johnny Carson show queued up and ready to broadcast. And I mean, here we are 50 years later. The show has been a huge success, obviously, for 50 years. Some of the greatest comedians have come out of that show. But could you imagine, I'm forgetting a key ingredient here of this story, which is the network producer, keeps telling Lorne Michaels, let's just put it off. Just scrap it. We'll regroup. We'll come back and try again next week. The network producer has been trying to get Lorne Michaels to call it off and try again the next week, all night long. This entire movie takes place over less than an hour and a half. When the movie starts, it's like maybe 2 hours. It's when the movie starts is 10:30. No, when the movie starts, I believe it's like just after 10 o'clock at night, and the live airtime of the show is 11:30. So all night, this whole movie, the network producer is trying to convince Lorne Michaels to call it, regroup, and try again the next week. Well, here we are 50 years later, in retrospect, obviously, right? We're listening to this podcast episode. If you've seen the movie or watching the movie, I'm telling you this summary of this movie with the knowledge of what we already know happens with this show. It's a huge success. It takes off. Well, what would have happened if Lorne Michaels had said, yeah, you're right. Let's just call it. We'll try again next week. But would there have been a next week? Would the show have ever aired if he had done that? Would they have ended up in this never-ending cycle of trying next week, trying next week, trying next week? And it was never right. It was never just right. It was never perfect. It was never, quote, ready. And so they never went live. What if that had happened? We would not have this great institution of American culture and comedy that we know and love today. Well, this movie opens with a title card and a quote from Lorne Michaels. And the quote comes up on the screen and it says, "The show doesn't go on because it's ready." And it looks like that's the end of the quote. But then the animation reveals that the second line of the quote, which says, "The show goes on because it's 11:30. And I read that, I read the quote first and then I watched the entire movie, and I just was thinking to myself the entire time, like, oh my goodness, this is almost like a live action skit of what it's like to attempt to write a book. If you imagine yourself as Lorne Michaels, and Saturday Night Live is the metaphorical representation of your book manuscript, and all the actors are the characters, and all the sketches that go into making up the show are the different scenes or events or little tidbits of disparate material that you've written here and written there and written there, and maybe they're even on sticky notes, maybe they're in different notebooks, maybe some of it's handwritten, some of it's typed, some of it you have in like notes on your phone, some of it you have even like voice memos that you've written to yourself, like remember to add that to that one section. It's just a mess. It's all over the place. And here you are, you're trying to wrap your arms around everything and gather everything and get it all to come together so that you can hold it. But you can't, if there's too much, you can't even put your arms all the way around it. Because when you try to close the grasp of your arms, little bits of it like spurt and squeeze out the top. It's like there's too much pressure around the edges to corral everything, and you're just constantly like pulling things out of the air and trying to shove it back down into your bushel. You're trying to corral all this material into a single cohesive whole, but instead they're running around smoking weed, having sex. I mean, this movie depicts that John Belushi, one of the comedians who we know and love and sadly died way too early, was on the first episode of Saturday Night Live. He darts off and takes off and leaves the studio literally like 15 minutes before showtime, before airtime. So one of your and that's the representation of one of your pieces of material that you're trying to like attach a string to and pin it down, and or like hook it with a fishing pole and reel it back in. And that inner critic, that voice inside your head is telling you, oh, just, it's not ready. Just, give up. Just throw in the towel. But instead of doing that, how can we all harness some of this Lorne Michaels energy of No, you know what? I got to press through. I got to work through this. I'm trying to create something that I've never seen before. I mean, obviously we can't say we're trying to create something that no one's ever seen before, because we've all seen a book. We've all seen books on similar themes to what it is that you're trying to write, and that's okay. Nobody's ever written it the way that you're writing it. Nobody's ever told it the way that you're telling it. No one has ever done it with your unique take and your unique voice and your unique perspective. So we can't say that if we're creating a book, we can't say we're creating something that no one's ever seen before, but we're certainly creating something that you've never seen before. I've never seen the finished product of my own book or books. I have a complete draft of one book, and I have a draft in progress on a second book. I've never seen the complete draft of the second book. So I'm trying to create something that I've never seen before. Your book is something you've never seen before. Yeah, it's going to be messy. Yeah, it's going to be chaotic. Yeah, you're going to try and corral it, and maybe it doesn't want to be corralled, at least not yet, not right now. And you just got to keep wrestling with it. And that's the work. And you show up and you do the work even if you're not ready, even if you don't feel ready. You don't show up and do the work because you're ready or because the book's ready. You don't submit or send out your manuscript or your draft or even shorter pieces because they're ready. You send them out, you work on your book, you write, not because you're ready or because the material is ready, but you do it because you have to. You do it because there's something inside of you that's driving you to do it. You have to do it. You don't know who you would be or what your life would be like without it. And we do it regardless of whether it ever gets published. And I believe that when we can get to that place, it's only a matter of time before you get published. Because you're serving the work. And you're serving something greater than your ego. You're serving something greater than yourself and your own talent and your own self-importance. And you know that there's power in the story that you have to tell. You know that there's power in the things that you have to say. And that power is going to infuse your work with some intangible universal magic that's going to take it where it needs to go. That's what I believe. That's what I help my clients work on and help them believe so that they can keep going when it gets hard, so that they can keep going when they feel like they're not ready. Because guess what? We're never ready. It's like jumping off the diving board at the pool for the first time. It's like driving for the first time. It's like getting on a bike for the first time. It's like roller skating for the first time. You're not ready to do that. The first time you've ever done it, you're not ready. The only way to learn is to just do it. All right, so that's what I have to share with you today, my friends. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. You can follow me on Instagram at Jana Marlise. You can follow Under the Gumtree on Instagram at Under Gumtree. You can sign up for my email list to keep in touch with me and learn about all the ways that are available to work with me by going to janamarlise.com/keep in touch. Keep in touch is hyphenated. And I forgot to mention this on the last 2 episodes, so I'm going to start saying it now. The theme song was written and performed by my husband, Jeremy Marin, the Existential Wine Guy. You can follow him on Instagram at the Existential Wine Guy. And I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for being here. Bye for now.